Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. One of the biggest factors that'll decide whether you make it through a disaster or not is how you respond to it. All the preps in the world won't make a bit of difference if you haven't thought out what you're going to do should the worst happen. So today we're going to be talking about things that you should do right before a disaster hits, as well as during its opening stages. But one thing you can do right now is ask yourself, what are you missing? If you knew that there was something bad headed your way, is there something that you would wish that you had, but you don't? Because if we're honest, we all have holes in our preps, and asking yourself those questions will help you kind of expose some of the bigger ones. Some people would say that they don't have enough food, while others would be concerned that they don't have a backup power option. But whatever it is, try to get that taken care of as soon as possible. If it's something big that you can't just go out and buy today, start setting some money aside for it as you can, because the worst thing that you can do is allow yourself to fall into a mental trap where the inability to take care of one big thing prevents you from taking care of a bunch of smaller things as well. Another thing that you should do right now is go ahead and take an inventory of any survival kits that you have. Most of us just can't afford to have the best gear replicated in multiple kits and then still have something available outside of a kit for everyday use or for things like hunting or camping. So what we tend to do is we borrow things from kits and we forget to return them. This is probably most common with things like get-home bags, because since you have it with you daily, there's a good chance that small emergencies or just everyday situations will cause you to use things like medications, bandages, or food. So go ahead and take a look at your kits and make sure that they have everything in them that you think that they do. Now, when you know that a disaster is coming, you need to figure out if you're going to bug in or bug out. And this is one area where the right decision really does depend on a combination of your unique personal situation and the particular disaster that you'll be dealing with. It also wouldn't hurt to go ahead and think through different scenarios and make game plans for them. That way you'll have a plan ahead of time and you're not trying to make critical decisions during a time where you're super stressed out because the world's falling apart around you. While most of us would prefer to bug in for most situations, there are some where bugging out may be necessary. For example, if there's a wildfire heading your way, it makes more sense to get out if you can. But since you never know what may happen, it makes sense to have plans for both bugging in and bugging out, even if you'll just be leaving for a short period of time. And when you're making that decision, you should also try to determine how much time you have before you either need to be on the road or have your home locked down and ready to ride out whatever's coming. Keeping your radio or television turned on for as long as those services are available will help you gather at least some information to make a better decision than just flying blind. And having that information will help you know how much time you have to do the other things that we'll talk about in this video and prioritize them, because you might not be able to do all of them. One of the first things that you should do when you know a disaster is coming is contact your loved ones to make sure that they're okay and that they understand what they need to do. But unfortunately, there could be situations where you may not be able to reach your loved ones. Communication networks could become overloaded due to overuse, or they may break down totally if they're physically damaged or a cyber attack knocks them out. If that were to happen, having a plan ahead of time would be very beneficial, so you want to have clear instructions for each member of your family. For example, if you have kids, you and your spouse should know who's going to pick up which child and where you'll meet if you aren't able to communicate. Older kids should know the safest ways to get home, and if you plan on using them to pick up younger kids, make sure that they're added to the authorized pickup list with either the school or the daycare. And with that, it would be far better if they already pick up that younger kid regularly anyway, because that way all the teachers and everybody there will know them and it won't seem all that out of the ordinary. You could also make reference cards for each member of your family to keep on them at all times. You could laminate those cards and put them in things like wallets, purses, or backpacks. And if you want to, you could even keep more detailed instructions, including some maps and vehicles. Another thing you should do during the opening stages of a crisis is try to withdraw some cash. And it would be best to do that while you're on your way home and only if it's safe to do so. While money may lose its value if a situation lasts long enough, there's a good chance that it'll still be useful early on. While some stores may go ahead and shut down if computerized payment systems go offline, other smaller businesses may stay open and accept cash. Having some on hand will at least give you a better chance of being able to get what you need. However, while trying to withdraw some extra cash is a good idea, you should always have some set aside at home for this purpose. It should also go without saying that you should have plenty of supplies at home so you don't have to make last-ditch trips to the store, but having some cash could give you some options if you realize you forgot something. Another thing you should do if you have a chance is top off your gas tank. If you're paying attention, you may be able to get to a gas station before most people realize that something's wrong. Having a little extra fuel would be helpful if you have to travel a long distance, you plan on bugging out, or you just get stuck in traffic. You should also know the locations of any gas stations near you that are off the beaten path. It's entirely possible that you could get in and out of those without any trouble while there's a whole bunch of people mobbing the gas stations in the main part of town. And a lot of the times, at least where I live, those gas stations are only a couple of miles out of the way. If you travel away from home frequently, purchase a new gas can and keep it in your vehicle. Now with that, you want to avoid filling it up until you need it, but if that does become necessary, it's going to at least give you a few extra gallons to get where you need to go. That's something that me and my family do when we go on road trips in case gas becomes hard to find. When we are able to find it, we can top off our gas tank and fill up that gas can so that we'll have it if gas isn't available later on. Also, if you have some more lead time, filling up any gas cans or propane tanks that you have at home would allow you to run things like generators or other equipment for a longer period of time. After you've contacted loved ones and made it home safely, locate your essential preps. These can include things like food and water storage, off-grid cooking options, generators, fuel, bug-out bags, and survival gear. Get those out, get them organized and ready to use. If you have something like door barricade brackets, this may be a good time to install those if you think people are going to get crazy. Also use this time to make sure that your gear is operational. Do things like test battery-operated lights and motion sensors and try to crank up your generator. If you have firearms, make sure there's not dust bunnies living inside of the bore, and also use this time to determine whether certain preps are safe to use or not. For example, generators are loud and will be very noticeable to those around you, so in some situations it may be best to not test it out, like I mentioned a second ago. Another thing to think about is that some outdoor cooking methods will produce smoke or odors that could let people know you have food. Also determine if the situation warrants hanging up blackout curtains to prevent your battery-operated lighting from being visible outside of your home. When it comes to food, you want to avoid dipping into your food storage too soon. If you still have power or it went out a short time ago, start by eating the things in your refrigerator, then move on to the stuff in the freezer. As a general rule, food inside of your fridge will stay good for around 3 hours after the power goes out, and food inside of a dedicated freezer will last for around 48. If you have a larger solar power option, you may want to use it for preserving the food in your freezer as long as you can. Freezers tend to use less power than refrigerators do, and since they can keep food safe for a longer period of time, that'll allow you to take a few hours to recharge your solar generator if necessary. 12-volt refrigerator freezers use way less power than full-size models and could be useful if you want to preserve things like meat or you need to keep medications cool. So the bottom line is use that time to make sure that you have what you need and determine how to use your preps in the smartest way possible. Another thing that you should do right before a disaster or during its opening stages is secure some last-ditch water storage. This will help any water that you already have stored last longer and could give you some to use for cleaning and other tasks. If you have something like a water bob or aquapod, that should be one of the first things that you fill up since they can hold up to 100 gallons, but you'll probably end up getting less just because most bathtubs are smaller than that. Those are good for keeping your water separate from any germs or chemicals that may be lurking in your bathtub, and they can also prevent insects like mosquitoes from using that water as a breeding ground. Also, if you have any collapsible water containers, it'd be a good idea to fill those up as well. And I like to have some of those on hand for that exact purpose because they don't take up a whole lot of space when you're not using them, but when you do need them, they can add significantly to your water storage. Even if you don't have dedicated water containers like these, you probably have something around the house that you can use. Head into the kitchen and fill up any pitchers or bowls that you have, and the larger the better. 5-gallon buckets are another good option. Any clean food grade buckets can be used for drinking water, while non-food grade buckets like those you get at hardware stores can be used to hold water for other tasks. But when filling up your containers, listen to any local news that may still be operational so you'll know if there's a boil water notice in your area. Also, if you notice that your water pressure is lower than normal, that could be another indication that you need to boil, filter, or treat your water prior to use. Being aware of those things can help prevent you and your loved ones from getting sick by drinking contaminated water that you thought was safe. Another thing you should do is get ready to collect rainwater whenever possible. Even if you don't have a full rainwater catchment system, there are other things you can do. Even simple things like setting plastic totes in your yard can collect some water, although you'll get a lot more if you use a tarp to channel that water into it. If you don't have any tarps but you have a tent, then you can use the rainfly from that for the same purpose. Large trash cans can also be used to collect rainwater, but be sure to avoid using scented bags in them since those chemicals can be harmful. Another thing that you should do before a disaster is charge essential devices. This will ensure that any electronics that you need are ready to go. If you have a solar generator, that should be one of the first things that you check. While most of them don't self-discharge quickly, you do want to make sure that it's at full power so it can hit the ground running if you need it. It also wouldn't hurt to go ahead and plug in things like your cell phone and laptop, especially if whatever you're facing is local or regional and unlikely to result in a widespread collapse of communication infrastructure. While a laptop may not seem like it would be all that useful in an emergency, a lot of them do have some pretty large batteries that can be used to charge other devices. Portable USB battery banks are another thing to top off, along with any rechargeable batteries that you may have. My family, for example, has several rechargeable AA's, AAA's, and D cells that we use to run everything from my son's nightlight all the way to wireless motion sensors outside. The D cells in particular are very useful for running fans during the summer, and since we have solar power options, they can be kept going long term. Power tool batteries are another good thing to charge since you may need to make repairs to your home or other structures, or you could be in a situation where you need to build fortifications quickly. Having operational power tools will allow you to do things like make cuts in dimensional lumber or plywood and drive screws much faster than with hand tools, although those are good to have as well, especially for longer term situations. You can also pick up other things like lights and fans that run on those power tool batteries as well. Also make sure that any flashlights, headlamps, or lanterns that you own are either fully charged or have fresh batteries. You don't want to be fumbling around in the dark because your flashlight or headlamp went dead. Emergency radios are another good thing to top off since they may be your best source of information during short-term emergencies or the opening stages of something more long-term. But you do want to be careful when recharging your devices. Lightning, for example, is infamous for frying electronics, and other power surges can cause problems as well. If the situation could involve an EMP, try to load up as many essential electronics as you can in a Faraday cage to protect them. Any solar power equipment that you have should be given priority since it can be used to provide long-term power to other essential devices. And if you have any extra electronics that you don't use all that often, it might be a good idea to keep those in a Faraday cage at all times because those events can happen very quickly, and if something goes down, at least you'll have something. But once you're home and have all your basics lined out, go ahead and load your car with items that you would want to have if you needed to bug out. And that's a good idea even if you plan on bugging in, because in a disaster things can happen very quickly. Having things like basic survival gear, bug out bags, and other essentials pre-staged would allow you to get out fast if you needed to. When doing this, park in your garage. This will prevent people from being able to see what you have in your car, and if you load it up while it's in the garage, your neighbors won't be any the wiser. Parking your car with the nose facing out is another thing that you can do to help you get out quickly if you need to. Now in this video we talked a lot about bugging in and bugging out, and those two topics are really too big to be covered in one video. So if you want to learn more about bugging in, be sure to check out this video, and if you want to learn more about what you would need to bug out effectively, be sure to check out this video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.